Stress, burnout, overwhelm, these concepts have moved from the back burner to the forefront of our conversations and experiences over the last year. Chances are you felt stress or levels of burnout. And today, we're going to take a closer look at the differences between stress and burnout and what you can do to recover. Welcome to Hot Topics. I am your host and human performance coach, Molly Proct. And today's guest holds a master's degree in positive psychology, is a professional certified coach, and is passionate about helping people navigate and recover from stress. I am so excited to have Jansen Judge back with us here today. Welcome, Jansen.
Thank you, Molly. I'm excited to be back.
Yes. Okay, so this topic is a good one. It's definitely buzzwords that we hear about stress or burnout and especially overwhelmed. And so Jansen, start by helping us really define the difference between stress and burnout. How do I know which one's which?
That is a great question. And I think it's a common thing to get confused. So the short answer is yes, there is a difference between stress and burnout. Stress comes from the difficult experiences we have in life, and stress is kind of our response to difficulty. Burnout is actually a stage of our stress response. It's the final stage of a response to stress. And it's what happens when we can no longer adapt to the difficulties we're experiencing. We can't keep going. So stress is really any difficult experience or circumstance that we have to adapt to. And it's anything from like going on a run to making sure we can pay the bills. So there is acute stress, something difficult is happening right now. I am buying a house. I am getting a divorce. I'm in a car accident. I'm in physical danger. That's acute stress. And then there's chronic stress when there are difficulties we're experiencing, but they're not life-threatening. They kind of become a background noise in our lives. So chronic stress is things like work stress, financial stress, political stress, that sort of thing. And like I said, burnout is a stage of our response to stress. So ideally, we experience a stressor, whether it's severe or not so severe, and we take time to rest and recover. If it goes on for a while, our body does a little bit of damage control for us so we can keep going. But ideally, we take that recovery time and we get back to baseline and the cycle is over. We're kind of right back to where we need to be. But what happens is we don't always rest and recover. We kind of keep pushing through. We run stress marathons. And our bodies begin to adapt to being constantly stressed. And that wears us down. It starts to have a negative impact mentally and physically. And if we spend too long adapting, too long waiting to recover, that's when we hit burnout. And so burnout is actually chronic, unmanaged stress, that final stage of our stress response. So yeah, that's kind of the difference between stress and burnout.
Got it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm curious, a couple months ago on the podcast, we talked a little bit about like mental health and anxiety and those types of things. Can you quickly kind of draw the alignment between like burnout and anxiety? I think like for me, if I have, a chronic stress, which is probably, I'm assuming, more typical to lead to burnout more so than an acute stress. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. And so yes, chronic stress. Again, burnout is chronic unmanaged stress. So we can have chronic stress, but if we are taking the time to manage it and to recover, we can kind of lift ourselves up to baseline. So burnout is that chronic unmanaged stress. And acute stress, depending on your life, if extreme difficulties are happening over and over and over again for a period of time, that's actually called episodic acute stress, and that can also lead to burnout. But most commonly, yes, burnout comes from chronic stress.
Got it. And so how do I know when I have landed in the realm of burnout? Like, what would be my indicator? Because just speaking from personal experience in life right now, there's I feel like I could probably identify a couple different areas of my life that have an element of chronic stress involved. And so, where would be my indicators that I have moved to the burnout stage from my unmanaged stress?
Yeah, that is a great question. So really the key difference between stress and burnout is how you feel and whether or not you feel like you can recover and get better. So even with chronic stress, we usually start to feel better when we take time to take a deep breath or when we get away from the stressor. So let's say you have chronic stress about work, and when you get away from work, you feel better. That's stress. Burnout is when you don't feel better, when those normal recovery tactics don't help you feel better. You are on empty. You kind of can't adapt any longer. And burnout actually comes with three distinct characteristics that I have always found really helpful. So there is exhaustion, physical and mental exhaustion, where you've kind of hit that point where you can't do anymore. But burnout can also look like cynicism, detachment from the people around you or from the world around you. So you might experience burnout as just kind of this feeling of giving up or being really cynical. And then also burnout can feel like just a complete lack of value or worth. Like you feel ineffective at what you do. So even if you did try, you feel like you're not giving anything. That is also a characteristic of burnout. So really the big difference is with stress, once you get away from the stressor, you feel better. With burnout, you have to do more than just get away from it. You are kind of at the end of your rope.
Mm. Can you those three main indicators, I think, exhaustion is one that seems relatively, easy to identify, or
Mhm.
feeling, ineffective at your job or maybe low productivity. Can you talk a little bit more about this concept of cynicism? Explain a little bit more how somebody could like really create the awareness, like inside of an experience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's actually that's personal to me, Molly, because in times that I've experienced burnout, that cynical, detached characteristic is what I experienced. And it was actually really hard for me to identify. And I think it's hard for a lot of us to identify. But cynicism might feel like, ugh, it's always going to be like this, or people, we're never going to get better, or kind of eye rolling and just really not seeing how things might get better. And then it also feels like detachment or a distance that you put between yourself and others. So that might be between yourself and colleagues, that might be between yourself and friends or family. But cynicism and detachment is really a feeling of being kind of like isolated, and like the people around you or the world around you is kind of like doomed almost or never gonna change.
Got it. And would you say that the detachment or the cynicism is related to that area of stress individually, or do you notice that it it almost blankets your life as a whole once you've hit that burnout stage and now everything is negative, or you're cynical over
Mm.
everything because you're in the burnout stage versus if you were just stressed over a particular experience or area of life and you were able to manage and come back to recovery?
You bring up something really important with that question, Molly, and it's not just about cynicism, burnout in general. So, again, if you think of burnout as that final stage of stress, whatever your stressor is, by not addressing it, by not managing it, it leads to burnout. And once you've hit that burnout stage, it does start to blanket your life. So, let's talk about feeling ineffective or unproductive at work. If you feel like you can't give anymore. Once you are in a place of burnout, it kind of starts to feel like you can't give any more to anything. If you hit
Yes.
the exhaustion, characteristic of burnout, that blankets, and suddenly you feel like you can't give anything, all of you. And the same goes for cynicism. So, I think an example a lot of us can relate to over the past year is we're seeing a lot of really tough stuff come to life. And tough is a really light word for it, but I don't think we need to dive much deeper. And it can really make you feel like, gosh, are we getting any better? And what happens is when we experience that stress of seeing kind of the bad come out of the people around us, and we don't take the time to address that and recover from that and connect with people in positive ways, that does start to blanket everything. Where suddenly you're looking out and you're thinking, gosh, I'm feeling cynical about my workplace. I'm feeling cynical about my family. I'm feeling cynical about my community. So really our stressors, when we don't address them, lead to the burnout, and that does start to kind of blanket our whole experience.
Yeah, that is incredibly helpful. I mean, I think for, our listeners, just identifying, is it blanketed or is it, specific perhaps? Just thinking about whatever stressor that you are experiencing in your life right now, whether it's, chronic or acute. I think that that blanket statement is a really great differentiator that easily we can identify in our own unique
Mhm.
experiences. So, okay, we're stressed and then we have landed in the burnout phase. I'm sure everybody is eager to hear, how do we recover? How do we get back to this recovery or this baseline that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to relate it to so recovery from stress is like stretching after a workout. You've gone through something tough. Now let me stretch what just worked so I can get better. Burnout recovery is like taking time off after an injury. It takes a little bit more care, a little bit more intentional support. And the Harvard Business Review actually just published a really great article on this topic. And they've done research over the past year. And what they found is that two things. One, the most important thing to recover from burnout is to feel like we can take control over that aspect of our life. The feeling like we are competent and capable enough to address whatever is causing this burnout. And then also, it's important to make your burnout recovery personal to your experience. And I think this is so important because what we've heard a lot in the past year is self care, self care, self care will save
Mhm.
us all. And I don't want to denounce self care because self care is really important. But let's talk about, again, feeling cynical or detached. If you are feeling distance from others, self care can actually make you feel worse because it isolates you even more. It might make you feel guilty. It might bring up other stressful feelings. So, let's say you are feeling detached or feeling cynical. One of the best things you can do to recover from that type of burnout is to actually go out and be kind to others, to go out and help. Helping can be healing. Offer someone encouragement, buy someone a coffee, give a listening ear. And I love this because the conversation about burnout recovery can get really individualistic, but being kind is healing. It's one of the ways we create meaning in life. But that being said, self care is helpful when you're feeling physically or mentally exhausted. So if you are on empty with your energy levels, that's when something like self care can do a world of good, refilling your tank completely with food, quiet time, movement, mending any kind of leaks in the system that make you feel more exhausted. So, setting solid boundaries and giving yourself some kindness and compassion.
Mm.
And then, if you're feeling ineffective, if you're feeling like you are just not meeting your own standards of productiveness, if you feel like you're not doing well enough, one of the best ways you can recover is lifting up your sense of self worth. So, again, being kind to others can help you feel better about yourself. And also, something that doesn't get enough press, in my opinion, is you can actually care for yourself by accomplishing small tasks, not the massive stuff. You don't have to clean out your garage. You can rearrange your desk and check that off your list. And it's incredibly helpful and healing if you're feeling ineffective. Finish a workout, tidy a room, see one small thing through to completion. It's really powerful. So again, even though burnout can start to blanket our lives, there are no blanket solutions. It really depends on how you are personally feeling, what's going on in your life, and who you are as a person. And if you are having chronic stress, if you haven't hit burnout yet, that's awesome. The best thing you can do to recover is give yourself time to rest. So stress is called fight or flight mode. The opposite of that is rest and digest. Taking time to get out of alert mode, committing to non-working hours, spending time outdoors or with friends and family, listening to music instead of the news, slow breathing. There's lots of ways we can create that rest response in our body.
I like that differentiator of, rest and digest is the appropriate step for stress recovery. And this element of feeling empowered to take control and to heal is the step for, when you're burnout. And I like those two differentiators because I think those marry really well together, but also help to paint a clear difference on what you are needing. And of course, if you are feeling like you are unwilling or unempowered to take control, then seeking that additional support from others or professionals can be, of course, the appropriate and necessary next step, beyond the burnout stage. So I think that's important to highlight. Jansen, is there anything that we can actually do to prevent stress? I know that's probably is like wanting a magic pill, right? But to prevent stress and especially to prevent the burnout, when we do have these very natural, stress responses to certain things in our life, what can we do to kind of prevent this ability of getting so far down the path of stress responses that we land in burnout?
Yeah. So unfortunately, the bad news is we can't prevent stress. It's part of life. We will be challenged, and that's not a bad thing. Our challenges can actually improve our well-being, but the best thing you can do is take the time to deal with it. Take the time to recover when you're experiencing a challenge. And that time to recover is a burnout preventer. And with burnout, it's a little bit complicated because it is about taking the time to deal with it. But burnout is also about the systems that we live and work in. So, talking directly to leaders here, the best way to help people with burnout is to make sure they have the support, like you said, Molly, the encouragement, the time, the resources to keep their tanks full, whether that's mental health support, work-life balance, leading by example. But the one thing we can all do, not necessarily to prevent burnout, but to ensure that we have what we need to recover, is compassion. And that sounds really lovely and light. But the truth is that recovery takes energy. It takes effort to look at ourselves or others and think, oh, I got to take care of that. And that's really hard to come by when you're depleted. But you can practice compassion and make your care muscles stronger so that when you do reach burnout, if you do reach burnout, you have that little bit left to take care of yourself. And you can practice self-compassion just by being kind to yourself instead of being a bully to yourself. So speaking to yourself with kindness, recognizing that difficulty is a normal experience. And there's also compassion meditations you can do. You may have heard it called loving kindness meditation. The original term for it is metta meditation. It's this ancient practice that we finally studied and found that it has a really tremendous impact on well-being. And I believe we have a recording of that we can link for our listeners. It's really a fantastic practice. But really, when it comes to both stress and burnout, what we can all do is practice a little bit of kindness for ourselves and for others, because that'll help us take the time to recover and be strong enough to recover.
That is wonderful. I can already notice an opportunity for myself to be more compassionate when I notice a little bit of self-judgment or being critical over
Mhm.
myself creeps into my, daily stressors. So I love that call out on compassion for self and for others. Jansen, thank you so much for being with us again today. We always love to have you here and hear your wisdom. The biggest things that I'm taking away from today are that stress comes with difficulties that we experience and really how we respond. And burnout is that final stage of stress when we can no longer adapt and keep going. And so recovery from stress and burnout needs to be personal. Look at the way that you're feeling or the reasons behind your stress to really help you understand what you need. And of course, compassion. Practice a little bit more compassion for yourself and for others. And that will help prevent burnout and of course help you stay strong enough to recover when you are in that stage of burnout. Thank you for joining me on this hot topic. Until next time, be well.